I'd be curious to get your thoughts on what it was like to be a woman working at that time. There's a lot of talk now about sexism in the business world and about the so-called glass ceiling in the business world. What were your experiences with being a working woman, you know, a couple of decades ago, when apparently there was, allegations of a lot more of that kind of sexist abuse in the workplace? Obviously, now we still experience people who suggest that that's a prevalent problem.
Well, both are true. It was then and it is now. That's just a fact. And let me quickly say, most people are not bad people. There are some bad people who engage in bad behavior, and that behavior has to be confronted. But most people are maybe thoughtless or careless or clueless, or maybe they're afraid. So I'll give you 3 examples. The first one I already mentioned. 2 men come to my desk and take a chance on me and say, "You can do more." And they encourage me to go on. My first client meeting ever at that vast company called AT&T was held in a strip club, because that's where the men went to have business lunches. And my male colleague didn't really want me to come. So he said, "We're going to the strip club, and I assume you won't come." I went because I couldn't be scared off of my job. We turned into very good colleagues over time, because it turned out he was afraid of me. He was afraid the MBA would take away his job. I had a boss introduce me as, "This is Carly, your new boss. She's our token bimbo." I've been called all kinds of names. My appearance has been commented on. Here's the truth. It's different when you're different. It is. The criticism is different. The challenges are different. And yet, for every thoughtless, clueless, careless person in any organization, in my experience, there are 10 times as many people who are well-meaning, who want to lift people up. The problem is, too often, the well-meaning people don't say anything. And so the bad behavior continues. And we've seen a lot of that in the press as well. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, pick your Matt Lauer, Harvey Weinstein, the gymnastics coach. People knew that was going on, and they didn't do anything about it.
So what's the best way for women to deal with that, or anybody who's being mistreated at work? And because one of the things that we see is, obviously, I totally agree, people who do this sort of stuff should be called out. Not only is my mom a working woman, my mom actually worked, my dad stayed home. My wife, as people know, is a doctor, so she's a working woman. What's the best way for folks to deal with this? Because on the one hand, you want to call things out when you see them. On the other hand, there's a converse sort of tendency for some people anyway to hide behind the 8 ball of victimhood, to feel like there's such an obstacle to overcome that I can never overcome it, and defeat themselves in the process. What's the best way to deal with these situations?
Well, the truth is it depends on the situation. So I'll tell you 2 stories. The guy who said, "We're going to go to the strip club to have lunch," right? Who was doing it obviously, purposefully to humiliate me and scare me. It almost worked. After that, he and I became great colleagues. We never talked about that day again, because the truth is I actually needed to work with him. He knew the clients, he knew the company, and he figured out he needed to work with me because he was kind of a pie in the sky guy, and I would work hard and understand the details and get it done. So we became good colleagues. We worked our way through it. The boss who introduced me as a token bimbo, I went into his office afterwards, shut the door, and said, "You will never speak to me that way again." Sometimes behavior has to be confronted. Sometimes you have to realize that someone was thoughtless and careless and clueless, and get over it. And what I tell young women, young people of all kinds, but young women especially, is my advice is don't get a chip on your shoulder. There are bad people, and bad people need to be confronted, but most people aren't. There may be thoughtless or clueless, so don't get a chip on your shoulder. And look for the people who will lift you up, because there are plenty of people who will, men and women. But also don't hide your light under a bushel. Don't try and fit in. Don't be less smart than you are. Be as smart as you are. Be as brave as you are. Be as tough as you are. And if somebody has a problem with that, it's their problem. Don't ever let it be your problem.
I mean, what's really inspiring about this sort of stuff, I think, is that it's very individually based stuff. It's not stuff where you're calling for, now we have to call for a giant piece of legislation, a big piece of social change. It's just stand up for yourself in the moment.
Yes, and by the way, the other thing that I think is going on, you talked about victimhood, and when people feel victimized, they feel helpless and powerless. And one of the reasons I wrote this book is because actually all of us have enormous power. We just don't realize it sometimes, and we don't realize how to unlock it and to use it. But the other thing that I worry about in this current climate of Me Too is everything is the same. And everything isn't the same. A gymnast, a coach of gymnasts who is abusing them routinely, or a Matt Lauer or a Harvey Weinstein, it's not the same as Joe Biden putting his hands on someone's shoulders. You can't create a situation where the real issues become trivialized by people saying, I felt slightly uncomfortable.